first Greek pharaohs 50,000 years ago. Before I start with this, I just want to reiterate about some names, Greek names that, if read backwards, are actually Egyptian locations. For example, Zeus, the god of the Olympian gods, the first god Zeus, the top god, is Suez. And Said, Port Said, is Dias, meaning god Dias. And also Aswan, where they reportedly got the stones for the Great Pyramids of Giza from Aswan, is Nausa, a part of northern Greece. So we have a lot of, besides Memphis and Thebes being regular names of areas which were Greek, so we have a lot of locations that are actually Greek names read backwards. But going to this, the first Greek pharaohs 50,000 years ago, Diogenes Laertius gives us an answer about the ancient gods. The solar eclipses are born 373 and the moon 832. That is, Hephaestion, the son of the Nile, introduced philosophy to Egypt, and from the time he lived until the passage of Alexander the Great around 330 BC, 4 tens of thousands and 863 years passed, that is, 48,863 years before Alexander the Great, and about 51,200 years before today. Anyone with astronomical knowledge can confirm Laertius through a computer and a suitable astronomical program to determine the time required, 373 total solar and 832 lunar eclipses to occur in Egypt. Hephaestion, son of Hera and Zeus, let's remember Suez is the backwards of Zeus, is one of the 12 gods of the ancient Greeks, of the ancient Greek pantheon. Although it is synonymous with the son of the Nile, this is an indication of when the gods acted on earth, and that is about 50,000 years before today. As a confirmation of all this comes the ancient historian Manethon, who in his Egyptian mentions Hephaestus as the first king before the flood and the first dynasty of the Egyptians, who reigned 727 years and 3/4 years. Herodotus, in his second book of the History Proof, informs us that the priests of Thebes, Egypt, during his visits there, showed him 341 wooden statues that represented successively from father to son the previous high priests until before from 11,000 years, which proves the long tradition of the priesthood. He was also told that before these 341 generations of priests, the gods lived with humans, but then no god in human form visited them. And Manethon of Egypt, O God, no human being can be born. Our story goes to Greek Egypt, the country that is above the Aegean. Manethon's Egyptians cover the history of the Egyptian dynasties for 36,525 years, of which 24,900 years before the flood. Manethon informs us that the first kings of Egypt were the gods Hephaestus, Sun, Agathothemon, Kronos, Osiris, Isis, and Typhon. The demigods followed as kings of Egypt: Horus, Ares, Anubis, Tethys, Sothos, and Zeus. Osiris was equated with many deities of the Greek pantheon, especially with Dionysius and Hades, originally a god of nature, an incarnation of the spirit of vegetation, which dies at harvest and is reborn when the seeds sprout. Osiris was worshipped throughout ancient Egypt as the god of the dead, and in this capacity he climbed to the first row of the Egyptian pantheon. The most beautiful and tallest of all the brunettes, as described, Osiris succeeded Geb's father to the throne of Egypt when he retired to heaven, proclaiming his sister Isis as queen. The first measure of the new divine pharaoh in his abolition of cannibalism, the change of nomadic life and permanent settlements, as well as the training of its subjects in the art of making agricultural tools for the cultivation of the land, and the production of wheats and grapes. With these, they would prepare the essential for human nutrition, namely bread, wine, and beer. Osiris introduced the worship of the gods, built the first temples, carved the first images of the gods, formulated the ritual order, and invented the two types of courtyards which were to accompany the chants during the festivities. And after that, he founded cities and legislated fair laws for the people, making the name Onofris, the good one, by which he is known as the fourth divine pharaoh. Primarily a civilizer, Osiris wanted to civilize the rest of the world outside of Egypt. Leaving Isis behind, he set out to conquer Asia, accompanied by Thoth, Anubis, and Ophoi. Enemy of violence, he joined under his scepter one country after another, with the only weapon being meekness and music. It's said that he disarmed the inhabitants with songs and music from various musical instruments. He returned to Egypt, having traveled all over the world and spreading civilization everywhere. I invited Dionysus, the noisy enthusiastic, the primary who has two natures and was born 3 times, the Bacchus king, the living in the fields, the unexpressed occult, who has 2 horns and 2 forms full of ivy, which it has the face of the bull and warlike one of Bacchus, the pure one that eats raw meat with the 3-year-old which feeds the grapes, and it sprouts as a veil. O Evuleus, multiply where you were born in the indescribable beds of Zeus and Persephone, immortal god demon. Hear, blessed, my voice and hurry with sweetness and affection. I am in a good mood with your companions. This is from Orphic Hymn to Dionysus. A few meters beyond the Great Pyramid of Giza, the Cheops Pyramid, is the famous Sphinx of Egypt that has a woman's head, a bull's body, lion's legs, and eagle's wings. Sphinxes are generally in mythology various monsters whose body parts consist of several of one being. They were wild monsters, silent and enigmatic. Such stings in antiquity exists in various parts of the known world, and one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. It's about 74 meters long, 6 meters wide, and 20 meters high. It's the oldest large monolithic statue in the world. As the astronomical alignments that indicate that the Sphinx is oriented so that it aligns with the horizon at the point where the sun rose at the vernal equinox, all the buildings in the area are nothing more than the mapping of various constellations of the celestial dome on Earth. There is a stellar correspondence of pyramids of Giza with the constellation of Orion. According to Graham Hancock, the 3 great pyramids correspond to the 3 stars of the Orion belt as it was in 10,500 BC. That's about 12,500 years ago. That is, during the period when the glaciers decrease, the sea levels rise worldwide, and Atlantis sinks. Some similar relations with the constellation of Leo and the corresponding cosmic of the Platonic year. The Sphinx is located exactly on the east-west axis of the Giza necropolis, with the gaze facing east. In this way, it's the signal of the sunrise at the vernal equinox. At the spring equinox of the year 10,500 BC, the sun of that year was 12 degrees below the horizon, with the sign of Leo already beginning to rise. The gaze of the Sphinx was gazing at the phenomenon and marking the sunrise at that moment, and the Sphinx was therefore identical to the celestial astrological age of Leo. Leo is the 5th sign of the zodiac and has the sun as its ruler. The sun is a planet that gives life. Without the light of the sun, nothing is fertilized and nothing is born. For mankind, it was the time when the Son of God was worshipped, Sun S-U-N. In Greek, Ilios dis Dikaiosinis, the Son of Righteousness, meaning the light-giving righteousness. The royal sign of Leo, the sign of creation, had marked the beginning of this era. It was the golden age of Zep Tepi, the first time, quote-unquote. The Sphinx is a monument with the body of a lion and, as they say, with the head of a lion or a woman. Pharaoh's head was recarved on the prehistoric. When the Sphinx was re-rolled, the lion's head was removed and the rock was given the shape of a present-day sternum. the cosmic or Platonic year, which concerns the change of the equinox, which takes place approximately every 2,150 years. One of the 14 simulation movements of the Earth is a particular circular motion of its polar axis, the so-called transition. This forces the polar axis to erase a cone over a period of about 25,800 years. It's noteworthy that each sign leaves its mark on the period of time it affects. The era of Leo begins the era of patriarchy and great kings. Age of Leo, 10,948 BC. Herodotus wrote that in Saida was the tomb of Osiris, and that the passions of the god were represented in a nearby lake in mysterious ceremonies. The patron goddess of the city was Neith. The cult is witnessed by the first dynasty around 3,100 to 3,050 BC. Greeks such as Herodotus, Plato, Diodorus identified it with the view of Athena, suggesting a connection with Athens. Diodorus narrates that Athena built Sais before the flood that destroyed Athens and Atlantis. While all Greek cities were destroyed during the flood, he continues, Egyptian cities, including Saida, escaped with Greek refugees led and protected by the view of Athena. Plato also mentions the city as the birthplace of Pharaoh Amasi. Plutarch mentions that the sanctuary of Sais of Athena, which he identifies with Isis, bore an inscription, I am all that has been and is and will be, and no mortal has lifted my veil so far. The temple of Saida, like many ancient Egyptian temples, had a medical school associated with it. The school had many female students and apparently a special department for gynecology and obstetrics. Busiris was king of Egypt. Busiris was cruel and inhospitable. He killed every foreigner who came to his kingdom. The Cypriot seer Phrasius, who advised Busiris to sacrifice a stranger to Zeus every year to stop the evil. The Egyptian king then killed Phrasius first and then all the foreigners who came to Egypt. Hercules put an end to the Busiris cruelty when he passed through Egypt on his journey for the feet of Hesperethus' apples or Gerion's oxen. They arrested him, then tied him tightly with leather straps to sacrifice him, but Hercules broke his bonds, killed Busiris, Astymanantes' son, and all the king's men. The Egyptian priest and historian Manethon, around 280 BC, was the first to write about this Egyptian. During the pre-dynastic period, 5,400 to 3,000 BC, various autonomous kingdoms with separate deities, different symbols but common use of basic hieroglyphic elements and belief in the afterlife, developed in southern and northern Egypt, and their main characteristic creations are stone vessels, colored triptychs from grooming, head-breaking ritual knives, and contain the basic elements of pharaonic culture. In 3000 BC, the unification of Egypt is achieved by Pharaoh Narmer or Aha, who is identified with King Minos according to Manethon. The first dynastic period followed 3000 to 2575 BC. That's the first of the third dynasties, which is marked by the establishment of the theocratic monarchy, where Pharaoh, absolute monarch, is identified with the god Horus and is considered his incarnation, God on earth. The order of the nobles is established and the hieroglyphs evolve. The statues and figurines of pharaohs, common people, and sacred animals are characterized by fontilism, monumentality, and naturalism, while the reliefs by the close relationship between speech, hieroglyphs, and image. Minos or Narmer was, according to the tradition, the first king of Egypt, and he united the kings of Upper and Lower Egypt, became their first king and founder of the first dynasty around the 4th millennium BC, 6,000 years ago. Herodotus mentions him as the moon and founder of Memphis, which was located on the old border of the two kingdoms and became the new capital of Egypt. He is credited with founding many temples and building dams. He is said to have reigned for 28 or 30 years, or according to Eusebius, 60 years. Eusebius, in a text that survives from the work of Manetho, mentions that he campaigned outside the borders of the country and was praised for his achievements. According to the same work, his death came from a hippopotamus attack, and he was succeeded by his son Athothis. And according to the Egyptian priest and writer Manetho, Minos ruled in Egypt before the flood. Minos, along with the next 7 kings, descended for 253 years. Their hegemony was after the reign of the gods and that of the demigods. Minos, in Greek mythology, was king of Crete. The kingdoms of Minos include the whole of Crete, which had the Minoan Empire, Minos, which had 100 cities, and the Cyclades, which we were called Minoans. The capital of the Minoan kingdom was Knossos, which is today's Heraklion Crete. The Minoan civilization took its name from Minos, which developed in Crete from 3000 to 1450 BC. According to Plato, Minos was very wise and with a remarkable legislative work. In addition, Homer praises him, something that according to Plato was not usual. Specifically, he mentions that Minos took the laws from Zeus himself every 9 years in the cave of Dicte, in the famous Dicteon Andron. The administration of Minos was considered humane, and just, and for this reason, according to legend, he was appointed as one of the judges of Hades along with his brother Rhadamanthus and Aeacus. But Minos made the final decisions. Quote, what is now called the Christian religion already existed among the ancients and was not lacking in the beginning of the human race, end quote. And when Christ appeared in the flesh, the true religion that already existed was called Christianity, according to what St. Augustine, 300 AD, wrote. According to Hecatius, therefore preceded by Manetho, Egypt suffered from the plague, and the authorities attributed to the presence of other people foreign to the established religious ceremonies, which angered the gods. According to Hecatius, the foreigners were persecuted in order for the Egyptian gods to return, something that resulted in the Danes and Cadmus going to Greece and Moses to Jerusalem, and this report coincides with the events of the time of Akhenaten, a fact that is reinforced by the report that Danaos of the tribes of Dan left at the same time as Moses. Of course, the tribe of Dan, a lot of them went to the area of Sparta, today's Sparta. Danaos and Egypt were brothers. Egypt is considered the founder and civilizer of the country, as is his son Nile. The god Osiris of the Egyptians is the Greek Dionysus. Since both are cut and resurrected, the Olympian gods showed the way to knowledge. The Greeks literally built Egypt, since all the cities have Greek names. The city of Said, if read upside down, forms the word Zeus. And as we said before, Aswan is Nausa. And what did we say? Said, Suez, Zeus, Said, Thias. Okay, things like that. Now, the city of Said, if read upside down, Zeus. Zeus is Suez. Said is Thias. The hieroglyphs of the Egyptians are early Greek, and the frescoes show Minoan rulers who ruled and were succeeded by many fewer Egyptian kings. So this is, I've translated this for you from a Greek article. Please leave your comments, and thank you for your support. Kindly support my Patreon account. The daily posts are 5 videos daily, and they are totally different from what I have on my YouTube channel. Thank you so much for your support and that you find all my content so interesting. You'll find the Patreon account details in the description box below.